I've got to make a new zero clearance insert for my table saw. This is my old one. It's all beat up and it was always too flimsy. I made it out of 1/4 inch Luan just because it would fit in there well, but it's just not sturdy enough. When I'm cutting it tends to flex and gives me issues. I got the tape on the back to raise it up to the right height, but I'm going to make one out of a little bit thicker plywood, and I'll just have to route the edges down to get them to the right height to match with my table. This piece of plywood just happened to be almost exactly the right length. It's maybe not even 1/8 of an inch longer than what I need. This is a Ridgid table saw. Bought it sometime between '99 and 2001. I'm not sure exactly when. It looks a lot like the Craftsman table saws that I see in videos. I'm kind of wondering if it was built to the same specs. Maybe Craftsman and Ridgid were being built by the same company. I don't know, I've never bothered to look into it. These extension wings I put on here said they would fit either a Craftsman or a Ridgid, and they did fit perfectly. Alright, I'm going to take this over to the bandsaw and trim these ends round. I think I'm going to trim them a little bit outside the line and then use the sander to bring them on into where they need to be. I had a combination square when I was a kid. I don't know where I got it, whether my dad or my grandfather gave it to me. I didn't know how to use it or what to do with it. I mean, I knew it was a ruler, but as far as the rest of it, I'd play with it. But I just bought this one a few years ago and actually learned how to use it. It's a really handy thing, and I had no idea how indispensable tool it was. But I'm going to use this to figure out the depth of my cut that I need to make in the edge of my insert. Seven 30-seconds. I'll try to use that to set the blade height. I decided rather than try to route all of this, I'm going to use the table saw and cut rabbit. It'll be similar. I'm coming in 3/8 from the edge. The lip in there is only about 1/4, but I want to give myself enough play because the insert fits pretty tight to the sides, so I don't have to get it super tight on the bottom part. Alright, I think that's pretty good. I may wind up having to adjust it a little bit. When I check my depth of my combination square, I can see that my rabbit cut is just barely shy of being deep enough. Rather than try to raise the blade a tiny bit and take another shave out of here, I'm probably going to just put some 120 grit sandpaper flat on my table and sand just a little bit off of here. So it looks like I'm okay on the width, but now I've got to cut out the ends. The ends come in a little wider than the main part of the table. So let's take a measurement here. But yeah, if I come in 3/4, that will work. So probably 5/8 on each side. So let's see if I can figure out how to draw this out. It's square down there. It comes in as a curve and it squares off and then turns into another curve. Same on both ends. Okay, I've got the blade set 3/4 of an inch to the outside from this block. So I'm going to use this block to get the end of the board in the right position so I don't cut in too far. It's better to use a block like this when you're using the miter gauge than to just use the fence, because you can have a situation where if you got the board against the fence and against the miter gauge, it can bind up and do a kickback. Alright, that just leaves me a little curved section on each end that I've got to hog out with the router. Alright, I'm going to get that thing set up and see what I can do. I got the vent set where it's 9/16 of an inch from the outside edge of the bit, and that'll give me the correct depth up to the edges. And I set this stop block in place to give me the position where I need to plunge. Got a little cleanup to do with the chisel, but I think it'll work just fine. I'll leave the router set up in case I decide I need to come back and touch it up any. Got the bottom edges of the insert cleaned up. My blade is too tall for the thick piece of plywood to sit all the way down into the table slot where it's supposed to go. I was trying to think of a way to do this. Well, I had a different way in mind, and I was trying to imagine a disclaimer that I would put out in case anything goes wrong. And I happened to think, why not just clamp it down on top of the other insert, which is the simplest and safest way to do it. I mean, the way I've got it secured in here, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be able to go anywhere. I'm going to come up partially through, probably not all the way, and then set it down and clamp it back down and finish out the cut. Normally when I'm doing this, I'll use the fence. I'll push the fence over top of the insert and lock it in place and then raise the blade up through, and that keeps the insert from shooting out. I am going to drill a hole to use a screw on this end, and I got to find some kind of clamp that I can put on the other end. I'm thinking I may be able to use one of the clamps to fasten the tabletop down with. We'll figure that out in a few minutes. Alright, I think I'm ready to go. We'll go fire up the dust collector. The insert came out a little bit too tall, and it was too much to try to sand off, so I decided to run it through my jointer. And the problem with that is the grain is going the wrong direction. You know, you can't joint cross grain, you have to joint with the grain. But I had the idea that maybe if I put it in there and turned it as far sideways as I could, it'd be alright. But it turns out I got some massive amounts of tear out anyway, even with it turned. But I filled them in with 5-minute epoxy and sanded them down smooth. So I've got my hole drilled for my screw. I used one of the brackets that you attach tabletops with, so I can hook the end of it in the way the original insert was hooked. The original insert actually had a spring-loaded piece, but I've got this one bent at the right angle where it holds it tight. So that's why I don't have to worry about it kicking out and hitting me in the face if the fence is not on top of it. Normally when I'm using a zero clearance insert, I'll have the fence all the way over really close to the blade, because it's usually because I'm trying to cut something thin. but I feel better with it being securely fastened down to the table.